They laughed at the human cadet until they saw his combat scores, best HFY stories. In the vast expanse of the Galactic Academy, the most prestigious institution for training future military leaders, there was a place where the most elite beings from across the universe came to hone their skills. The alien races that populated the academy were diverse, intelligent, and strong. The Arcth, with their razor-sharp talons and enhanced agility. The Vor, towering behemoths with impenetrable skin and an innate understanding of strategy. The Luskans, whose psychic abilities made them unmatched in mental warfare. And then there was him. Cadet Michael Donovan, the lone human in the entire academy. At first, the other cadets snickered when they saw him. Humans were seen as a new species, barely able to compete with the advanced, centuries-old races that thrived across the stars. The academy's halls buzzed with whispered remarks about the human cadet. His size, a mere 6 feet tall, was laughable compared to the towering Vor, who stood nearly 3 times that. His reflexes were nothing special compared to the Arcth, whose speed seemed almost supernatural. And his intellect? Well, the Luskans had been studying the intricacies of quantum physics since they were infants. It wasn't just the other students. The instructors, too, looked at him with mild amusement, certain that while his heart and determination were admirable, he'd never truly measure up. "Good luck, Cadet Donovan," said Instructor Kornek, a sharp-eyed Vorian strategist, as he dismissed the class for the day. "Don't get too comfortable in the top rankings. I suspect we'll see you fall to the bottom in the next simulation." Donovan smiled but said nothing. He had been warned that the first few weeks would be tough, that he would face ridicule, but he had also been told that his determination, grit, and loyalty would be his greatest assets. After all, humanity had overcome so much in its short time in the galaxy. What was a little prejudice compared to that? The time for the first real test came sooner than expected. A full-scale war simulation was scheduled. Every cadet was required to lead a squad of advanced combatants in a simulated battle. The goal was simple: lead your team to victory or face the consequences of failure. The combat scores would determine who was worthy of being promoted and who would be sent home. The other cadets were cocky. The Arcth leader, tall, boasted about his agility. The Vor general, Zarnak, spoke of his invulnerability. The Luskans exchanged knowing looks, confident in their psychic prowess. And then there was Donovan. Standing before his squad, a mix of Arcth, Vor, and Luskans, Donovan felt the weight of their gazes. They were skeptical. No one believed he could lead them to victory. "Let's get this over with," said Tal, the Arcth leader, with a dismissive flick of his claws. "We all know you'll fail, human." But Donovan remained calm. He wasn't here to prove anything to them. He was here to win. As the simulation began, chaos erupted. Alien warships zoomed past, explosions rattled the battlefield, and enemies charged from all directions. But Donovan was different. While the others faltered, trying to adapt to the unpredictable nature of the simulation, Donovan's tactical mind never wavered. His decisions were calculated, his actions swift. His human squad, despite being outmatched in raw strength and psychic ability, followed his orders without hesitation. His command was clear, his timing perfect. Every move was a calculated step toward victory. The Arcth, Tal, was taken down by a simple but effective trap. The Vor general, Zarnak, overwhelmed by a swift counterattack that played into his pride. The Luskans, usually the most perceptive of the group, were caught off guard by Donovan's unexpected tactics. The final battle came down to just Donovan and one other cadet, a seasoned Vor named Garvok. The battlefield was a wasteland of wreckage, the sky burning with the remnants of fallen ships. Garvok was a formidable opponent. His strength alone could break through any defense. But Donovan knew something Garvok didn't. Vor were predictable in their aggression. With a calm precision, Donovan led Garvok into a carefully designed trap. The battle was over in minutes. Garvok stood in stunned silence as Donovan's final move left him with no way to counter. The simulation ended with a victory for Donovan and his squad, and a stunned silence fell over the academy. The other cadets couldn't believe it. They had laughed at him, mocked his humanity, but now, they were forced to respect him. The next day, as the results were posted, Donovan's combat scores were the highest of any cadet in the entire academy. His tactical brilliance, his quick thinking, and his ability to lead under pressure had earned him the respect he deserved. As the Academy's commanders looked over the results, they nodded in approval. "We may have underestimated the human cadet," one of them remarked, "but no longer." The cadets, one by one, approached him with newfound respect. Tal, the Archth, offered a nod of acknowledgement. Zarnak, the Vor, gave him a rare, respectful grunt, and even the Luskans, with their psychic abilities, couldn't help but admire his strategic mind. "Human," Tal said, his voice tinged with genuine respect. "I've never met anyone like you." Donovan smiled, his confidence unshaken. "Just remember," he said, "we humans might not be the strongest, fastest, or most psychic, but when it comes to overcoming the odds, no one does it better." And so, the human cadet, who had once been the laughingstock of the Academy, was now a living legend among the stars. No one would ever doubt the potential of humanity again. The end. They laughed at the human cadet until they saw his combat scores, the sequel. The Academy was buzzing with excitement after Cadet Michael Donovan's stunning victory in the simulation. Word of his triumph spread quickly, from the lower halls to the highest ranks of the galactic military. But while many had been forced to acknowledge the human's brilliance in combat, there were those who couldn't accept it. On the outside, the victory seemed like just another footnote in the endless stream of tests and simulations. But in reality, Donovan had made an enemy, or rather, a rival. Captain Zernak, the Vor officer whose squad had fallen to Donovan's tactics, was not one to take defeat lightly. He had spent centuries honing his combat skills, and he wasn't about to let some lowly human rise above him. Word of Donovan's victory was a stain on Zernak's pride, and he swore to reclaim his honor, no matter the cost. Zernak began to shadow Donovan, watching his every move, waiting for a moment of weakness. The Vor was a master of patience, and he believed that Donovan's success had been a mere fluke, a trick that would never work a second time. Weeks passed, and Donovan remained a rising star in the Academy. His scores continued to outshine those of the other cadets, and his reputation grew. The Luskans, who had been skeptical of his abilities at first, now watched him with awe. Even the Archth had begun to respect him, though Tal still maintained a competitive air, always striving to outdo him in their training simulations. But there was one challenge that no one had anticipated. The Academy was preparing for its most prestigious event, the Zero-G Combat Trials. Every cadet, regardless of rank or species, would be tested in simulated zero-gravity environments, facing off against alien creatures, advanced weaponry, and extreme combat conditions. The trials were a spectacle, a true test of endurance, skill, and quick thinking, and they were designed to push cadets to their limits. Captain Zernak, confident in his physical superiority, was certain that this would be his chance to defeat Donovan once and for all. If he could defeat the human in a real combat scenario, it would prove that his previous defeat had been nothing but a fluke. But this time, he would make sure there were no traps, no surprises. The Zero-G combat trials began with an air of anticipation. Cadets filed into the arena, a vast, simulated expanse filled with floating obstacles, traps, and automated drones. The rules were simple. Each cadet would face a series of challenges designed to test their ability to fight and think in zero gravity. The final task would be a one-on-one battle against an opponent of the Academy's choosing. Donovan floated into the arena, his movements calculated and smooth. His experience as a human, while not physically extraordinary, had given him an edge in maneuvering through the unpredictable environment. He had studied the tactics, watched the veterans, and practiced for hours in the Academy's Zero-G chambers. His focus was unwavering. He was here to win, once again. Zernak, on the other hand, seemed to relish in the challenge. His massive frame, built for power rather than finesse, would make his movements sluggish in the low gravity. But he didn't care. He was confident in his sheer physical strength and the power of his armor. Zero-G combat might slow him down, but he knew that a single strike from him would be enough to crush any opponent, human or otherwise. The first phase of the trials was designed to test their agility and reaction time. Cadets were required to navigate a maze of floating obstacles while avoiding moving drones. The drones fired high-powered lasers, forcing the cadets to think quickly or risk disqualification. Zernak charged ahead, his immense strength propelling him through the course with brute force. He tore through the obstacles, demolishing anything in his path. The Vor cadets watching from the sidelines cheered, sure that this would be their captain's moment of glory. But Donovan moved with a different kind of grace. His human mind, trained to think critically under pressure, allowed him to avoid the drones with ease. Using the obstacles to his advantage, he glided through the maze, always staying one step ahead. The lasers barely missed him. But he didn't panic, he anticipated the movements, calculating every trajectory. By the time Zernak reached the finish line, Donovan had already completed the course with minimal effort. The crowd gasped. It was clear that Donovan's approach was different. His human adaptability was proving to be his greatest asset. He had already scored higher than most cadets in the first phase. But Zernak's time to shine was yet to come. The second phase was a direct combat test. 2 cadets would face each other in hand-to-hand combat, using only the weapons provided by the simulation. In this phase, strength and raw power mattered far more than speed or agility. Zernak was certain this would be his time to crush Donovan. As the battle began, Zernak immediately charged, using his vast size to his advantage. His strikes were powerful enough to shatter the simulated floor beneath them, and his armor made him nearly indestructible. He swung his massive fists at Donovan, each blow carrying the potential to end the fight. But Donovan didn't flinch. He didn't need to overpower Zernak. Instead, he used his speed and strategy. He darted to the side, dodging each strike with minimal movement. Zernak's punches made shockwaves, but Donovan remained calm, always keeping a few steps ahead. The human cadet was a blur, constantly moving, reading Zernak's intentions, and using the environment to his advantage. Zernak's frustration grew. He couldn't land a hit. His movements were too slow in the low gravity, and his overwhelming confidence was proving to be his undoing. Finally, in one swift, well-timed maneuver, Donovan disarmed Zernak, sending his opponent's weapon spinning into the distance. The crowd went silent as the giant Vor found himself standing, disarmed and panting, while the human cadet remained steady. Zernak's pride was shattered. He couldn't believe it. His strength, his power, had meant nothing in the face of Donovan's precision and intellect. But the final test awaited. The last phase of the Zero-G combat trials was a fight to the death, well, simulated. Of course, the cadets would face off in a simulated arena, using all the skills they had learned so far. This time, there would be no tricks, no surprises, just pure, unadulterated combat. Zernak, now fully aware of Donovan's abilities, was determined to prove himself. He pushed aside his pride and attacked with everything he had. His strikes were brutal, his movements faster than before. But Donovan was no longer just reacting. He had studied Zernak's tactics. He knew exactly what was coming. The battle was fierce. Zernak's strength made him a dangerous opponent, but Donovan's strategy and cunning kept him one step ahead. And in the final moments of the fight, Donovan executed a perfect counterattack, using Zernak's own momentum to send him crashing into the simulated arena wall. Zernak lay there, defeated and breathless, as Donovan stood victorious once again. The crowd erupted into applause. Donovan had done the impossible. He had beaten Zernak, the mighty Vor, in his own arena. And this time, there was no doubt left. The end. They laughed at the human cadet until they saw his combat scores, the final test. The sound of applause echoed through the massive arena, vibrating against the walls as the final battle ended in Donovan's favor. The cadet stood victorious once more, his chest heaving, but his expression calm, focused. As the virtual environment powered down and the real world returned, the crowd's roars faded, but their respect for the human cadet was now undeniable. But with victory came a new challenge, one far beyond any simulation. Commander Drac, the highest-ranking officer in the academy, a towering figure from the ancient Seraph race, stepped forward, his voice booming. "Cadet Donovan, your scores have surpassed even the greatest of our combatants. You have earned our respect, and now you must face the final test." The crowd went silent. The final test? No cadet had ever passed it, and it was said to be designed not just to test physical prowess but to break a cadet's spirit. "Now you will face the gauntlet," Drac continued. "It is a trial that no cadet has ever completed. A real-world mission, one where you must infiltrate an enemy stronghold, retrieve critical intelligence, and return alive. You will be going up against fully equipped combatants from an opposing faction, alien mercenaries, notorious for their brutality. They will stop at nothing to prevent you from succeeding. It is a mission of survival, and you will be on your own. The murmurs from the other cadets were filled with disbelief. The gauntlet had been whispered about for generations. A myth of sorts, a test so dangerous that no cadet had ever completed it. Those who had tried had never returned. Donovan's heart rate didn't rise. His confidence had been built through every battle, every challenge, every setback. He knew what he had to do. "Commander," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the silence, "I'll take the test." Drax's eyes narrowed. "You understand the stakes? No one has ever come back from this trial. There is no glory in it, only survival." "I understand," Donovan replied. "But if I can survive everything else here, I can survive this." The commander studied him for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. "So be it. Prepare yourself, cadet." The next day, Donovan was thrust into the most grueling trial of his life. He was dropped onto an alien planet under the cover of darkness, alone and armed with only basic supplies, a standard-issue combat rifle, a sidearm, a med kit, and a communication device that would only function within a limited range. The mission: infiltrate a well-defended enemy base, steal vital intelligence, and return to the extraction point. Failure would result in death. No one would come to rescue him. The planet was a wasteland, desolate and harsh. The enemy base was located in a massive canyon, surrounded by cliffs and deep ravines. To survive here, Donovan knew he'd have to rely on everything he'd learned: combat tactics, survival skills, and most importantly, his human adaptability. He had to move quickly, and he had to move smart. Hours passed as Donovan advanced through the canyon, avoiding patrols and using the cover of rocks and debris. The mercenaries guarding the base were ruthless and well-trained, but Donovan's ability to think on his feet allowed him to slip past their watchful eyes. The first challenge had been avoiding the guards, but now came the more difficult task: getting inside. The base itself was a fortress, guarded by high-tech surveillance systems, armed patrols, and a heavily reinforced security gate. It would take an army to storm it directly, but Donovan wasn't here to storm. He was here to infiltrate. Using his knowledge of tactics, he devised a plan to use the base's own systems against them. He disabled a nearby drone by setting up a makeshift EMP device. The drone fell from the sky with a loud thud, crashing just outside the gate's control panel. The guards rushed to investigate, leaving their posts unguarded for a few precious minutes. Donovan slipped into the shadows and accessed the control panel. Minutes later, he was inside, the gates opening with a quiet hiss behind him. He knew this wouldn't last long. He had to move fast. Inside the base, Donovan's mind raced. The mission was far from over. He needed the intel, the plans for the mercenaries' next strike against the academy. The information was locked in a secure vault deep within the base. He navigated the halls silently, avoiding detection and using the cover of corridors to get closer to his target. As he moved deeper, a wave of tension washed over him. The quiet was almost too much. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. But he pressed on, knowing that if he hesitated now, he might not get another chance. Suddenly, alarms blared. A trap. The mercenaries had detected his presence. The sound of boots echoed down the halls. They were closing in, fast. Donovan didn't hesitate. He ducked into a nearby maintenance shaft and began to climb. The confined space was narrow, but it gave him the time he needed to think. The vault was 2 levels down, hidden beneath layers of reinforced steel. Donovan had no choice but to go the long way, through the lower maintenance tunnels, where the security was weakest. The mercenaries were on his tail, but Donovan was prepared. As he reached the vault's location, he activated the breach charges he had quietly planted along the tunnel walls. The explosion echoed in the confined space, shaking the very foundation of the base. The mercenaries scrambled, trying to contain the breach. But it was too late. Donovan was already inside. He grabbed the intel, just a small data chip, and made his way back toward the surface. The mission was almost complete, but escaping wasn't going to be easy. At the extraction point, an enemy ambush awaited. It was clear that the mercenaries knew he would come here. They had prepared a final trap. But Donovan had one more trick up his sleeve. As the ambushers emerged from the shadows, he used his environment against them. One by one, he outsmarted them, his quick thinking and relentless determination leaving the mercenaries with no room to react. By the time the extraction ship arrived, Donovan was bloodied but unbroken. the intel in his possession, his mission a success. Commander Drac was waiting at the landing zone when Donovan arrived. His expression was unreadable. "You did it," he said simply, handing Donovan a small data reader to confirm the mission's success. Donovan nodded, his chest still heaving from the exertion. "I told you I would." Drac regarded him for a moment longer, then finally spoke again, his voice tinged with respect. "You've proven yourself, Cadet Donovan. You may be human, but in your actions, you've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of." Donovan's gaze was steady. "We've been underestimated before, but humanity will always rise to the challenge." And with that, the human cadet, who had once been laughed at, became the stuff of legend. No longer the outsider, Donovan was now a symbol of what it meant to overcome impossible odds, to survive and thrive when everything seemed stacked against you. The Academy would never forget the name of Cadet Michael Donovan, the human who had proven that sometimes, the greatest weapon was not strength or speed, but the unyielding spirit of humanity. The end. They laughed at the human cadet, until they saw his combat scores, the rising storm. Cadet Michael Donovan had just survived the gauntlet, a mission that no one before him had dared to complete, let alone succeed at. He had faced down enemies, infiltrated fortified enemy bases, and come back alive, all while proving to the galaxy that humanity's resolve and adaptability could match any species the stars had to offer. But now, the galaxy's eyes weren't just on Donovan, they were on the growing storm of conflict that threatened to consume everything. The success of the gauntlet had not only earned Donovan a place among the stars' elite but also garnered the attention of those who saw his potential as a weapon. He had proven that humanity wasn't just a species to be laughed at. He was a symbol of resilience, a living testament to the underdog story that no one ever expected. However, as with all things in the galaxy, there were those who saw potential not in admiration, but as a threat to be neutralized. It started with whispers, dark rumors about a faction that had emerged in the far reaches of space, the Oryx Coalition, a powerful, shadowy group of mercenaries, warlords, and disillusioned former military leaders, had begun to rally against the Galactic Council's growing influence. They didn't care about peace or diplomacy, they only cared about power, and in their eyes, humanity represented a wild card they couldn't control. The Oryx had learned of Donovan's success in the gauntlet, and to them, it was more than just a matter of combat prowess. They saw a young human who was outsmarting, outmaneuvering, and surviving against every obstacle they threw at him. To the Oryx, this was an affront to their carefully constructed empire of fear and control. And so, they decided to test him. The first sign of the storm came in the form of an unexpected transmission. Donovan had returned to his quarters, still recovering from the gauntlet, when his communication device buzzed. "Cadet Donovan," a cold voice crackled over the line. "You've proven yourself in the simulations, in the field, and against the odds, but now, it's time for you to face a real challenge. You are hereby marked for termination by the Oryx Coalition. You will receive no help. There is no extraction. You will either fall, or you will fight until you've erased the stain you've placed on our name." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Donovan staring at the blank screen in disbelief. He had fought opponents before, but this wasn't just a test, it was a direct threat from a faction with resources, manpower, and motives far beyond anything he'd encountered. The Academy wasn't going to let him handle this alone. Word spread quickly that the Oryx Coalition had set their sights on Donovan, and the Galactic Council made it clear, this wasn't just about one cadet anymore. It was a declaration of war. Donovan stood in front of the Council's representative, a stern-faced Arch General named Vrax, who had been assigned to oversee the military response. "You have gained the respect of the Academy, Cadet Donovan, but the Oryx are no joke. You're a symbol now. They've issued a challenge, and if we don't respond, it will only embolden them. It's not just you they want to kill, it's humanity itself," Vrax said, his tone measured but urgent. "We need to send a clear message, or else the entire galaxy will believe that humanity is just another pawn for the taking." Donovan stood tall, despite the weight of the situation bearing down on him. "What do you need me to do, General?" "We need you to go on the offensive," Vrax replied, his eyes narrowing. "The Oryx are gathering in a region of space we believe is their stronghold. It's heavily fortified, and they have a fleet that outnumbers anything we've ever seen. But if you can infiltrate their base, like you've done before, and get the intelligence on their next move. We might be able to put an end to their growing influence. The plan was risky. The Oryx didn't just rely on conventional weaponry. They were masters of psychological warfare, and their soldiers were trained in counterintelligence and subterfuge. But Donovan knew this wasn't just about fighting, it was about proving something far greater. The Oryx had made a mistake by targeting humanity, and he wasn't about to let them win. The mission was set. Donovan was briefed, equipped with the latest stealth technology and the best combat gear the Academy could provide. His mission: infiltrate the Oryx stronghold, retrieve their war plans, and destroy their command structure. This time, there would be no simulations. This would be the real thing. As his ship dropped through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet, Donovan couldn't help but think back to the challenges he'd already overcome. But this time, it was different. The stakes were higher, and the consequences would be far more severe if he failed. He landed on the outskirts of the Oryx base, a sprawling facility built into a mountain range, surrounded by heavily armed patrols and automated defense systems. This was a far cry from the simulations he had aced at the Academy. The terrain was hostile, the enemies lethal, and every move had to be calculated. Donovan's first task was to disable the outer perimeter's sensors and infiltrate the base unnoticed. He used his knowledge of military technology, planting EMP devices around key nodes, disrupting the communications network long enough to slip inside undetected. His breathing was steady, his movements precise. He had done this before. Inside the base, he moved through the halls, using shadows to cloak his every step. The Oryx were a ruthless, battle-hardened group, but Donovan wasn't just relying on his weapons, he was relying on his brain, his knowledge of enemy tactics, his understanding of the terrain, and his ability to outthink his opponents gave him an edge that none of the Oryx mercenaries had expected. As Donovan neared the command center, he encountered his first real challenge, an elite Oryx assassin, heavily armed and on high alert. She was fast, silent, and deadly, everything Donovan had come to expect from the Coalition's finest. But Donovan was faster. He used his environment, tricking her into a series of dead ends, where her heightened senses and reflexes were rendered useless. The assassin fell to the ground with a muffled thud, her weapons disabled. Donovan moved on, the information he needed drawing ever closer. But then, he encountered something unexpected, a face he recognized. "Donovan," the man said, his voice low and filled with venom, "you're braver than I thought. But this is where your story ends." It was Zernak. The Vor general, once humiliated by Donovan's brilliance in combat, had joined the Oryx coalition. He had been sent as part of the final defense for the command center. "You're not walking out of here," Zernak growled, his massive frame filling the doorway. Donovan didn't hesitate. He'd faced Zernak before, and though the Vor was a towering, powerful beast, Donovan had learned from their previous encounter. It wasn't strength that would win this battle, it was strategy. "You've underestimated me once before, Zernak," Donovan said, his voice calm and unwavering. The battle was fierce, the two clashing in a blur of speed and strength. Zernak was a beast, but Donovan had learned to read his movements, to anticipate his strikes. In a final, explosive move, Donovan used Zernak's own momentum against him, flipping him over and disabling his weapon systems. Zernak lay on the ground, stunned but alive. "You're not going to kill me, human," Zernak spat. "The Oryx will never stop." Donovan stood over him, his face impassive. "We'll see about that." With the last of Zernak's defenses neutralized, Donovan infiltrated the command center, gathering the crucial intel on the Oryx's plans to attack the Galactic Council. They laughed at the human cadet until they saw his combat scores, the Oryx reborn. Donovan's victory over Zernak and his success in retrieving the critical intelligence from the Oryx stronghold had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Oryx coalition, once a shadowy group bent on destroying humanity's rise, was reeling. Yet, as with every great force in the galaxy, the fall of one leader only created a power vacuum, and the Oryx were far from done. In fact, they were evolving, adapting, just as Donovan had. The intelligence Donovan had retrieved was staggering. The Oryx weren't simply a group of mercenaries and warlords, they were backed by a new and terrifying force, the Reborn. The Reborn were a faction within the Oryx coalition, a group of former military leaders and scientists who had discovered the secret to cybernetic augmentation by blending organic beings with advanced technology. It wasn't just an army of soldiers, it was an army of cyborgs, each one more powerful, faster, and deadlier than anything the galaxy had ever seen. This was no longer just about proving humanity's strength, it was about survival. In the wake of Donovan's successful mission, the Galactic Council convened to discuss their next steps. The Aurochs had regrouped, and whispers of the reborn were spreading like wildfire. The Coalition's forces were now being reinforced by an army of cybernetic warriors, half human, half machine, more than capable of crushing entire star systems. The Council had two choices: play it safe and hope that the Aurochs would turn on each other, or confront the threat head-on and risk all-out war. But after Donovan's success, they knew the time for passive responses had passed. "Cadet Donovan," said Vrax, the Arch General who had overseen his last mission, "you've earned our trust, but this is no longer a simple covert operation. The Aurochs are rebuilding, and they are coming for us. We need you for something much larger now." Donovan stood in front of the Council's vast holographic table, the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. "What do you need me to do, General?" Vrax's expression softened for a moment, but his voice remained stern. "We need you to lead an elite strike team to destroy the heart of the Aurochs reborn. We've located their primary base of operations. It's heavily guarded, surrounded by cybernetic enforcers, but if we can strike there, it will cripple the reborn's influence." Donovan nodded, his thoughts already racing. He knew this was bigger than any challenge he'd faced before, but he had always risen to the occasion. "When do we leave?" "Immediately," Vrax said, his eyes narrowing. "The sooner we move, the better. The longer we wait, the stronger they get." Donovan was given command of a new strike team, a diverse group of elite soldiers from various races, each hand-picked by the Galactic Council for their unique skills. There was Tal, the Arch warrior whose unmatched speed and dexterity had always placed him just behind Donovan in the academy. Kess, a Luskan sniper with eyes that never missed their mark. And Near, a veteran from the Zorathi species, known for his hacking expertise and ability to disable even the most advanced security systems. The mission was clear: infiltrate the Aurochs reborn space, located on a remote moon far beyond the reach of the Galactic Council, disable their defense systems, and eliminate their leadership before they could escalate their plans further. The journey was long, and the dangers were ever present. Along the way, Donovan found himself pondering how the Aurochs had come to this point. The reborn were something else entirely, a creation born from desperation and the desire to hold power at all costs. They weren't just soldiers, they were experiments, a twisted reflection of the Aurochs' obsession with control. And now, those experiments were coming for the galaxy. "Everyone, stay sharp," Donovan said, his voice low but firm as the team neared their objective. "We're walking into the heart of enemy territory, and we can't afford any mistakes." They arrived on the moon's surface under the cover of night, landing on a rocky outcrop just outside the Aurochs base. The facility was a massive structure, built into the side of a cliff, its walls lined with blinking lights and guarded by armed sentries. They would need to move quickly, or risk alerting the entire base to their presence. Using Kess's precision and Near's tech expertise, the team disabled the outer perimeter's sensors, allowing them to slip inside unnoticed. The deeper they went, the more ominous the facility became. The air was thick with the smell of oil and metal, and the walls seemed to hum with the energy of the machines within. Donovan's heart beat steadily as they made their way through the hallways. Each step brought them closer to their goal, and yet, the sense of being watched never left. The Aurochs were waiting, they always were. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the crackling of an announcement system. "Warning," the cold voice echoed across the base. "Intruders detected. Reborn forces deployed. Terminate all threats immediately." The sound of heavy boots echoed in the distance, and Donovan knew they didn't have much time. "Move, now." Kess took point, her sniper rifle aimed at the door leading into the main facility. One shot from her would take out the cameras and lock down the base's entry points. Near was busy hacking into the central control system, disabling security and giving the team more room to maneuver. They had made it to the heart of the base, but the real challenge had just begun. The Aurochs reborn were about to make their move. Donovan stepped forward as the doors to the central command room opened. Inside, standing in front of a massive holomap of the galaxy, was a figure he didn't expect to see. Zernak. But he was different now. The once proud Vor warrior had been augmented, his body a blend of flesh and cybernetics. His eyes glowed with a cold, mechanized intensity. His movements were smooth, fluid, and impossibly fast. He was no longer the beast Donovan had faced on the Academy's training grounds. This was something far worse. Donovan. Zernak's voice rumbled, now enhanced by cybernetic vocal processors. You were a worthy adversary once, but you've underestimated the Reborn. We have the power to reshape the galaxy. You can't stop us. Why? Donovan asked, his voice steady. Why join them? The Oryx weren't invincible before, and they sure as hell aren't now. Zernak's mechanical limbs shifted as he stepped closer. The Oryx were never about victory. Human, we are about evolution. You see, the Reborn are the future, an evolution of flesh and metal. The old ways of the galaxy are dying, and when humanity falls, we will rebuild in our image. Donovan's mind raced. The Reborn weren't just about power, they were about reshaping the very fabric of the galaxy. If they succeeded, it would mean the end of the old order, and humanity would be its first target. Zernak lunged, his cybernetic arm swinging with terrifying speed. Donovan barely dodged, but it was enough. He had fought Zernak before, he knew his patterns. As Zernak prepared to strike again, Donovan used his agility and knowledge of his opponent's tactics, flipping over him and driving his combat knife into the exposed wiring of Zernak's back. The Vor let out a mechanical screech, staggering backward, but he wasn't finished. The Reborn's enhancements kept him alive longer than any normal being would have been. End it, Donovan, Zernak snarled, his voice now a mix of pain and rage. You will not survive this, no one can. But Donovan's resolve hardened. I've faced worse. Zernak, you'll be the last mistake the Oryx ever make. In one final, calculated strike, Donovan disabled Zernak's cybernetic enhancements, shutting him down for good. The room went silent, and for a moment, Donovan allowed himself a breath. They laughed at the human cadet, until they saw his combat scores, the last stand. The silence that followed Zernak's defeat was almost deafening. The room, once filled with the low hum of machinery and the occasional crackle of a comm system, now echoed only the sound of their breathing. The team stood in awe of Donovan, once the human cadet who had been laughed at, now the one who had struck the final blow to one of the most dangerous forces the galaxy had ever known. But even as Donovan looked down at Zernak's incapacitated form, he knew the victory was bittersweet. The Oryx were not simply an army, they were an ideology, and while one leader had fallen, the coalition would not be so easily defeated. We need to move, Donovan said, breaking the silence. This place is going to be crawling with Reborn reinforcements any minute now. Let's finish what we came for. The team wasted no time. They made their way through the now chaotic corridors of the base, avoiding incoming Oryx patrols and scrambling mercenaries. Nir's expertise in hacking had given them an edge, shutting down key security systems to create safe passages. But even with the advantage, Donovan knew they were running out of time. The base's emergency systems would kick in soon, and if they didn't disable the core systems soon, the Oryx would initiate their escape protocol, sending the entire base into lockdown and triggering a full-scale evacuation of the remaining Reborn forces. As they reached the main control room, Kes took point, her sniper rifle trained on the door while Nir worked on cracking the final layer of security. Every second felt like an eternity. If they failed to get the critical data on the Oryx's next move, the Reborn would come back stronger than ever, and the galaxy would be plunged into war. I've got it. Nir's voice rang out as he bypassed the last firewall and gained access to the control console. I'm pulling the data now. But just as the progress bar began to fill, a chilling voice echoed through the comm system. Well done, Cadet. You've certainly made things interesting. It was Commander Irail, the true leader of the Oryx Reborn. Unlike Zernak, Irail had no cybernetic enhancements. He didn't need them. His mind was sharp, calculating, and ruthless. He had been the architect of the Reborn's cybernetic revolution, the one who had made the decision to merge flesh with metal and reshape his forces into a new army. And now, it was clear, he wasn't going to let Donovan walk away with victory so easily. Nir, don't wait for the download to finish, Donovan ordered, his eyes scanning the darkened corners of the room. We've been compromised. Before anyone could react, the door to the control room slammed open. Dozens of reborn soldiers, cybernetic warriors enhanced beyond human understanding, charged into the room. Their cold, glowing eyes fixed on the team. Their metal limbs hummed as they advanced, silent and deadly. Irayle's voice came again, now emanating from the comm system speakers in every corner of the room. You've proven yourselves capable, Donovan, but this is where the game ends. I will not let you take this data. The reborn will rise, and the galaxy will bow to us. Donovan's heart pounded, but his mind remained clear. There was no time to think about the bigger picture now. The reborn had them cornered. It was do or die. Stay close, Donovan commanded, his eyes flicking over to the team. We've trained for this. We fight together. Tal, the Arcth warrior, stepped forward, his twin blades drawn. His speed was unmatched, and he was a whirlwind of death as he clashed with the reborn soldiers. Every strike was precision, every movement calculated. Kes covered him, her sniper rifle silent but lethal, picking off enemies from the shadows. Meanwhile, Nier, the Zorathi tech expert, was working at breakneck speed to disable the enemy's systems from within the control room. But even as the team fought, Donovan knew they were outmatched. The reborn were stronger, faster, and more resilient than anything they had faced. These were the soldiers of a new age, blending the best of organic and synthetic. They would stop at nothing to wipe out the threat Donovan posed. The team was being pushed back toward the control center, the walls closing in. Tal's blades cut through another reborn, but for each one they brought down, two more took its place. Near, Donovan shouted. How much longer? Almost there. Just a few more seconds, Near responded, his fingers flying across the terminal. I've got the data. I just need to send it to the fleet. But before he could finish, Irayle's voice cut through the chaos once more. You've underestimated me, Donovan. You've underestimated the reborn. And now, you will learn the true price of your defiance. The lights in the room flickered as Irayle activated the base's self-destruct sequence. The countdown began. 30 minutes until detonation. The stakes had just become clear. Failure meant the annihilation of their mission and their lives. Time to go, Donovan said, his eyes locking with the team's. Near, get that data out now. Kes, cover Tal. We fight our way out. No hesitation. Understood, Kes replied, her sniper rifle already shifting aim toward another wave of incoming reborn. As Near completed the upload, the countdown timer on the central console began to tick down, the seconds slipping away like sand through an hourglass. The base was on the verge of collapse, but the mission wasn't over yet. They still had to escape. The team pushed forward, every muscle in their bodies screaming from exhaustion, but they were driven by something stronger, survival. Minutes later, the team emerged from the facility, a chaotic blend of violence and strategy, the pounding of their hearts drowned out by the sounds of battle. They ran for the extraction point, hoping the base's internal chaos would be enough to cover their escape. But just as they neared the drop zone, the worst possible scenario unfolded. The Oryx had deployed their final weapon, their ace in the hole. Irayle stood before them, flanked by his personal guard of reborn warriors, all fully armed and ready for the final confrontation. You thought you could win, Irayle's voice rang out, but you've only delayed the inevitable. The reborn are unstoppable, and your resistance is a fleeting illusion. Donovan's grip tightened on his rifle. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and yet he didn't flinch. This was it. There was no turning back now. We'll see about that, Donovan said, his voice steady. And with that, the final battle began. The clash of weapons filled the air. Tal and Kes fought like a blur, cutting through the reborn warriors with unmatched precision. Near provided crucial support, hacking into the base's systems to disable enemy reinforcements and buying the team just enough time to breach the final perimeter. But it wasn't just about fighting anymore. The clock was ticking down to zero. Donovan needed to end this now, or they would all die. As the battle raged on, Donovan faced Irayle one final time. The Oryx leader's eyes burned with an intensity only matched by his delusion of invincibility. Your humanity is your weakness, Donovan, Irayle sneered, raising his blade. You will fall like all the others. Donovan didn't hesitate. He was faster, more agile. The fight was brutal, but his focus never wavered. In one decisive strike, Donovan disarmed Irayle, sending his blade skittering across the rocky ground. The Oryx commander stumbled, and Donovan's combat knife found its mark. Irel's voice rasped in defeat, his body crumpling to the ground. This isn't over. With Irel defeated, the remaining reborn forces faltered. The tide of battle shifted. Donovan signaled to his team, and together, they fought their way toward the extraction point, barely escaping the self-destructing base as the countdown reached its final moments.